Destiny of a Savior by Famous Fault. Chapter 5. Cursed. Rio turned the little sign claiming that they were open, so that it showed that they were closed. Once again they had a successful week, and Yugi, Atem, and he were a bit worn out from all the hard work. Yugi did the bookkeeping, while Rio watched the dark city as he drew the curtains closed behind the door. They had all been doing this for over 3 months, and already they knew that if business would keep going the way it did, they could continue for a long time. Though not one of them was really happy about the way life had turned out. Their success didn't mean anything to either of them. They saw it more as a means to stay alive than anything else. At the same time, it was the only thing the two of them really had. After they both had done their respective chores, they together made their way into Yugi's living room before they each collapsed on the couch from exhaustion. Yugi knew that if he stayed in that position for too long, he'd fall asleep like that, waking most likely overslept and with permanently complaining muscles. After a couple of minutes, Yugi heard Rio getting up. "I'm going home. I'll see you tomorrow." "Where do you find the strength to walk home now?" Yugi asked without looking up. Rio chuckled softly. "The night's out will do me good. Perhaps it would do you some good too." Yugi heard that Rio had made his way over to the hallway. "Good night," the albino called before opening the door. "Good night," Yugi replied, before dragging himself from the couch. He should at least make it upstairs to sleep in a decent bed rather than the downstairs furniture. Yawning, he made his way up towards his bedroom. This was pretty much the way he felt like every workday, especially Fridays and Saturdays. Smiling at people all day was more tiring than he recalled. How he had managed to walk around with a smile for almost 10 years was beyond him. "Did you know it takes half a second longer to lie than to tell the truth?" Atem asked with a subdued tone, which sounded rather odd. Yugi frowned. "What has that to do with anything?" "Just saying." Yugi knew very well what Atem was referring to, and he did not like it. It was not the smiling which made him tired, it was the going through the motions which drained him. This normal life did not suit him anymore. Being hunted and later hunter had shaped him for far more active and dangerous situations than the one they were facing at present. It was probably even worse for the pharaoh. He had never had a single peaceful moment in his life until now. After 5,000 years of either life-threatening danger or unmatched darkness, this life made him rather restless. He did, however, not try to show it, constantly reminding himself that it was Yugi's life he was intruding on. Yugi was halfway up the stairs when he changed his mind. Rio was right, he told Atem, and walked down the stairs with more energy than he had when walking up the stairs. "Some night air might do us some good. I know the exact where to go." A quarter of an hour later, the two were standing next to each other on the graveyard of Domino. Yugi hadn't brought anything with him, but that was okay. He did not need to prove to others that he was finally paying his respects. What mattered was that his friends knew it. He saw the white roses, probably from the day before. They looked well enough for that. The night air was gentle and refreshing, although not quite as fresh as at Hogwarts. Yugi shook the thought out of his head. The reason he liked the graveyard was because Hogwarts was so far away from it. He would not think too much about it here. Yugi roamed from grave to grave, and then back again. The stars didn't give enough light to read what the graves said, but Yugi knew which grave belonged to who, by heart. Atem, however, averted his eyes, not looking at the graves. It wasn't the first time he did that, but it was the first time Yugi noticed that Atem always avoided looking at the graves. "Why don't you look at them?" Yugi asked with a frown, unwilling to speak out loud. "Do you remember when Zork's priest, when he was still possessing Rio, told you that he and I strove for the same goal?" Yugi nodded, recalling the night before going to Egypt when he had run into Yami Bakura after Ryuzaki and Haga had stolen the God Guards and the Millennium items. Bakura had told him that they both wanted to open the door to the underworld, as Yami Bakura had called it, or more commonly called the afterlife. "You didn't believe him? You questioned his motives," Yugi recalled. "In the end, he was right, though. We both wanted the same thing. We wanted Zork to revive. He because he served Zork, and I because I wanted to defeat him once for all. I wanted that evil to return. I made sure he would. Then forgot about it." Atem sat down, still in spirit form. His gaze did not even sweep over the graves of his friends. "I don't understand," Yugi whispered, alarmed. "I could not defeat Zork or his priest. After the Thief King revived him, everyone just perished. I managed to make him harmless by locking him away, but I could not satisfy myself with that. I should have terminated my memories for good, not leaving a key behind. I knew it would help Zork to revive, yet I did.
I made sure our battle could be resumed. Had he not found my name... No, that's not correct. Had it not been a game, Zork would never have revived. He would not have had the possibility to.
Yugi still wasn't catching up completely. He had not been a part of the Pharaoh's memories. He did not understand. Not completely. Atem understood that Yugi didn't understand yet and continued.
Yami Bakura used a special token to revive Zork. In a game, that was possible. The reason Yami Bakura chose to revive himself in the game, affecting the past, was because he already knew what would happen and could act on that. He wanted the advantage. He could just as well have searched for the name, like he did to begin with, and have revived Zork in the here and now. Had he done so, the outcome of the battle would probably have been even worse. Do you understand?
He asked. Yugi nodded. Zork could have been here, in the modern world. Atem confirmed it with a short nod.
Indeed. I put this world in danger simply because I was not satisfied with locking him away. I wanted to destroy him. Like Bakura said, I started this game. Had I not, they would still have been alive.
Atem made a sweeping gesture with his hands over the tombstones, still not looking at them. But, Yugi said, being surprised at hearing his own voice. He had not realized he had spoken out loud. He did not like the sound at that moment. It sounded wrong. Had you done that, you would have never had the possibility to pass on to the afterlife. You would have been stuck here forever without memories.
That's a sacrifice I was willing to make. The upside from having my memories is that I knew my motives. I didn't even think about the afterlife. I thought about Zork, and how important it was to destroy him and the Shadow Games. Now, the cost which had to be paid in the end was too high, and we did not even fully succeed. Zork and his priest might have been destroyed, but the shadows are still around.
And so were you, Yugi sighed. I did not know you blamed yourself for their death. Atem shrugged, averting his eyes now from Yugi too.
You do now.
I would have found it easier to understand had you done it because you did not want to end up without memories. But, knowing you correctly, I think I understand why you did what you did. So would they have. In the end, we would have succeeded had it not been for... Yugi trailed off, unwilling to speak the name of the man currently residing in Azkaban. It's not your fault.
I started this game,
Atem said, facing the ground. And when the game ended, they were still alive, Yugi said forcefully. Thinking about all the things Atem did feel guilty about, he was surprised his friend hadn't broken down yet. It ended when I beat you. When you lost to me, the game ended, granting you access to the afterlife. Their deaths had nothing to do with you.
In the end, it was because of my power that Lucius Malfoy killed everyone.
Atem snapped harshly, not even noticing that it was the closest to an argument he and Yugi had come since their first duel with Raphael.
It's also because of me that he killed Rebecca.
Yugi went to sit next to the Pharaoh. I've never seen you this depressed before. Atem laughed without any humor in his voice. He couldn't help but notice that Yugi did not deny it once again.
It was actually worse when you disappeared,
Atem replied and looked at Yugi. Then Yugi flashed a genuine smile, looking at Jonochi's tombstone. I never asked. How did the rest react? He was pretty sure he could hit bullseyes there, and he was right.
Jonochi punched me and told me to pull myself together,
Atem said, with a disturbed expression on his face. Yugi laughed out loud, the sound echoing ominously over the graveyard, but Yugi didn't seem to be bothered. He met Atem's gaze with sparkling eyes. I think I'll let Jonochi do the talking from now on. Atem grimaced. It was true that if Jonochi had seen him sitting there, he would probably have been equally annoyed with him as he had been after he had returned without Yugi. Did you? Atem looked at Yugi confused.
Did what?
Did you pull yourself together? Atem looked away from Yugi.
You know that I didn't. That was very different from now. That was you. I pulled myself together after I dueled you. After you told me to always trust in our bond.
Yugi smiled again, putting a hand on the back of his head. Yeah, I don't exactly remember too much about that. Atem just stared at Yugi.
Seriously?
Yugi nodded.
You were a bit harsh, although you did what was necessary. Do you remember we dueled?
Atem asked, not sure if he would be disappointed or relieved. I remember you winning, and then I felt a lot better after that. But that's all, Yugi admitted, amused at his darker's expression. Then his smile grew. When you say I was a bit harsh, you mean I was pretty hardcore on you, right? Atem just stared at Yugi, never having heard him use such words in such a calm tone before. The anxious spirit even doubted that he himself knew what hardcore meant. Thought so, Yugi said, sounding rather pleased. Shame I can't remember. Atem had to disagree, but he decided not to say anything on the matter. Yugi, under the control of the Orichalcos, had not been a pleasant sight, and that had been the point. But still, Yami was fine with being the only one of the two having that image in his head. Yugi put an arm across Atem's shoulders, being the only animate thing able to touch the spirit. He knew that to an outsider it would have looked extremely weird. It was a good thing they were nearing midnight. Even though it was because of your power that Lucius Malfoy killed our friends, that still leaves the blame with Lucius, not you. Stop feeling so guilty about things you were not responsible for. Atem looked at Yugi, then, for the first time, at the tombstones of his friends. It was too dark to decipher the kanji on the graves, but Atem instinctively knew that the one he was looking at was Jinochi's. As they heard a clock strike 12 in the distance, the two figures huddled close together. The only thing really visible in the darkness were the glowing red eyes of the ancient spirits and the white roses on the graves of his friends. There was no denying that the school was far more interesting when there were actual people in it. Rebecca had never imagined spending a summer holiday in a school, but it couldn't be helped, she supposed. Hogwarts was the most ghost-friendly place in all of Britain, and although far from all ghosts spend their time there, it was where most ghosts felt happiest. It was a fact that life, as a ghost got boring pretty quickly. The summer had felt much longer than 2 months, the days dragging by. Although Rebecca had to say that being left alone in the school and get bored was better than being harassed by the spirit community as she was when in the Ministry of Magic. Yeah, Hogwarts was much better. It had become even better when the students had returned. A lot of the boredom disappeared. It was pretty interesting to watch the students when they were unaware about being watched. She had actually not wanted anyone to know that she was still around at all. McGonagall had found her when she had just entered Hogwarts, still confused as to what had happened. McGonagall had helped her back on her non-existent feet. Naturally, Dumbledore had known too. He knew every ghost in the castle, and that she could have accepted. Dumbledore did not ask annoying questions. He should, however, not have called her in front of the entire school. She hadn't wanted to, and he had known that. Well, she had made a show out of it, receiving help from the most unlikely of people. When Rebecca first had seen the dark magician make his way through the castle during the summer, she had denied it. It was simply not possible. Less than a minute later, she had done some imaginative cursing, knowing full well that it was very possible. It had, after all, been her the Firecracken had fought with, and the Firecracken and the dark magician were the same, both shadow creatures. One of the advantages of being dead was that Rebecca now could tell the difference between the shadow creatures and those of the Dominion. Are you here for any particular reason? She had asked, appearing in front of him. You are Rebecca, he had stated, levitating on. He did not walk, he floated over the ground. Rebecca had nodded. And you are the dark magician, she stated in her turn. You did not answer my question. He is not done yet, the purple-robed man had said, slightly cryptic. Rebecca did, however, understand what he meant. No, she protested. He conquered the darkness in his heart. The both of them did. I came back to make sure of that. They should be done. The dark magician turned to look at her, and confused, Rebecca noticed that he looked different than normal. His hair was brown instead of a purplish blue, and his eyes were a less intense shade of blue. In addition to that, he had black lines under them. I'm proud of you. You made a great sacrifice. You are wrong, though. My king won't be done until he destroys the shadows and passes on to the afterlife. You don't speak like a shadow creature, Rebecca noticed. This man was less inert than the shadow creatures Rebecca had come across before. In truth, I'm not really a shadow creature, the man said. My name is Mahad. I'm half human. Rebecca had honestly no good reply to that. Not at all. What did one say about something like that? Eventually, Rebecca came with the very intelligent reply of, Huh? The dark magician, Mahad, laughed. He never told you about us, Mahad said with a smile which disappeared as quickly as it had appeared. He honestly never tells anything much, Rebecca muttered, once again causing the dark magician to smile for a second. I doubt that even Yugi knows everything. He didn't tell some, though. You were one of the priests, Mana's mentor, owner of the Millennium Ring. That was me, Mahad confirmed. Rebecca shook her head. Ghosts were a lot easier distracted than humans, and she found it hard to focus. Still, she said, trying to remember her original question. They should be done with Hogwarts. Why are you here? There is a way to destroy the shadows. Not one of us knows how. That is up to the Pharaoh to figure out. But we know that it lays here. The Pharaoh's second chance lays in the wizarding world, Hogwarts even. There is, however, something in the way. Something which makes that it will be hard to nearly impossible to figure out a way to destroy the shadows. An imminent threat to all of these, Mahad explained. Voldemort, Rebecca said, understanding. The dark magician looked at her and nodded. Yes, indeed. The shadow creatures themselves want this to end, even if that means our own demise. But right now, this power-hungry non-human is threatening this world, and like this, there is no chance my pharaoh will... Then the dark magician disappeared. Rebecca first did not understand what had happened, but when she looked around, she saw, to her great surprise, that Mahad was lying face down on the floor. Rebecca couldn't help herself. She had started laughing until non-existent tears streamed down her non-existent face. This is not funny and very undignified, he said sourly, doing his best to get up again. Why did you even trip? You don't even touch the ground, Rebecca asked, still sounding amused. Being the only one who had ever seen the dark magician trip made her feel pretty proud of herself, although she didn't really have anything to do with it. Since I'm part human and part not, gravity doesn't really know what to do with me. Shadow creatures aren't affected by it, and mostly gravity treats me as one. But at times, when it decides I'm human, it pulls me down. It's unappreciated. Mahad did, however, not sound more than slightly annoyed, although his dislike of the situation was apparent by his words. Rebecca just thought it to be even more amusing, but she gathered herself. You are going to meddle in the war. It was a statement, not a question. We will do what we can, but most of us are too dependent on the shadows. The Pharaoh will return, though. Fate has given him another chance. But first, Voldemort has to be beat. This fight is his, and the Pharaoh and friend which I knew never walked away from a fight, Mahad said with full conviction. He doesn't see it as his fight, Rebecca warned him. He does, Mahad said, still with conviction in his voice. Lucius Malfoy killed his friends, including you. This is more his fight than you realize. Rebecca couldn't protest against that. You are here. Is that also because you are part human? Mahad nodded. I can stand being away from the shadows even when not called upon, as long as I return on occasion. It troubled me that my king lost control over the shadows to a degree in which we could create breaches, gateways to this world. It has, however, not been misused, and it is an unexpected advantage now. And the dominion of the beasts? Rebecca asked with a frown. The dark magician shrugged, something which looked rather weird in his attire. They have not bothered with the battles of the Pharaoh before. Any battle since Atlantis, really. They'll bide their time. Perhaps that's because the Pharaoh saved their world, that they'll help him. But there are no guarantees. Dark Magician Girl will help, but otherwise they are an unknown factor. My Patronus was from the Dominion of the Beasts, Rebecca muttered. An unknown factor, Mahad repeated. So, now, back to my first question. What are you doing here? Rebecca asked, not able to keep focusing on the Dominion. I'm going to teach again. I thought, Mana, I could teach anyone. I think it's a good position to keep track of things. If you are going to apply for the History of Magic job, I change a tire, Rebecca mused, looking at the purple robes of the dark magician, and with those words they had parted. Naturally, it had been Mahad who had helped her to burn down the banners over the table, although he still claimed he was absolutely innocent when it came to the hourglasses. Rebecca had only vaguely wondered who had broken them, as the ghost, not really able to hook herself up on anything. Sir Nicholas had, however, informed her that the more time she spent among people, the more human she'd become again. She had served as Mahad's eyes and ears ever since, spying on the students and teachers alike. It was impossible to miss that most people were slightly wary of Professor Mashashan, but it was overall and not specific, so it mattered very little. It had not taken long for Rebecca to realize that Mahad was doing his best to manipulate the first years. "Why only the first years?" she had asked. "Those who are older have already learned that magic is supposed to be a certain way. They are not open to the possibility that a lot of what they have learned is nonsense. I hope to teach them to think like a magician. It could help a lot." Rebecca wasn't sure if she liked the fact that he was teaching students to think like magicians, but truth be told, she did not know what magicians thought like, so she couldn't really object either. She decided that he knew what he was doing. He had more than 5,000 years more experience than she had. The thing which kept her awake at night, aside from the fact that she was dead, were her friends. She did not know how to face Tracy and Peter, or even Dean. She knew that they had been looking for her several times, but she did not have the strength to deal with them. She would, though, sooner or later. Snape liked the Hogsmeade trips. The castle went quiet, peaceful, no screaming or running students complaining about everything they could think of. Recalling the weather of the day, he smiled with glee at the prospect of the students out in the biting wind. Snape's peace did, however, not last very long. It never did. Not that day, either. Snape was hardly surprised when Filch entered his office with a cursed opal necklace. He checked it several times, but was unable to find what was wrong with it. Yes, it was cursed. It most definitely was, and it meant to kill. The thing Snape could not figure out was how, and he hated it. An hour after Filch had left, McGonagall showed up in Snape's office. Snape was once again not surprised, but was disappointed to tell his colleague that he could not find what the nature of the curse was, nor what to do about it. McGonagall informed him in her turn about Katie Bell and what had happened to her. Snape wasn't surprised by the fact that Potter, Weasley, and Granger were witnesses, either. She told him about Harry's suspicions, too. Snape did not reply, but he had to hand it to Potter. He was smarter than some thought. It was a surprisingly large amount of people who deemed him stupid and claimed that he had just been lucky. Snape knew it was not true. Potter was skilled at a few selected things. "All I can say," he said, looking at McGonagall with a grave expression, "is that Miss Bell is lucky to be alive." Once again, someone knocked on the door. McGonagall and Snape exchanged a glance, the elder woman shaking her head, indicating she had not told anyone about the matter at hand. "Who's there?" Snape asked the door. "I am," a familiar voice said, and Snape sighed silently. Of course, the magician had great timing. The fact was that Snape feared the foreigner, although he never would admit that. "Come in," he said, leaving his voice empty of all emotion. The door opened reluctantly, and Professor Marcheshon stepped inside. The look on his face pissed Snape off, to put it nicely. It was a look of pure disgust, and Snape thought it was aimed at his office. Then his anger disappeared as he noticed that the magician was looking at the necklace on Snape's desk, and not at his office. "Did you come for any particular reason?" Snape asked, rather unfriendly. The man did not even notice Snape's unfriendly tone. "It stinks." "Excuse me," Snape asked, pure hostility in his voice now. The Egyptian looked at him, something condescending in his eyes. "It was not an insult, Professor Snape," he said, unamused. "I'm trained to recognize all sorts of magic using all 6 senses. When I say something stinks, it's because it does. It also means that it is very dark. What exactly is that thing?" "We do not know," McGonagall said quietly. "Can I have a look at it?" he asked, directing the question at both of them. Snape nodded, silently hoping that the magician would not find the cause. He did not want to be inferior to a man younger than him. Then again, they did not really have time for such childish wishes. The magician walked towards the desk and looked at the necklace with undivided attention. "Its inner energy flow has been contaminated," he stated. "It's aggressive. Just by touch, it can contaminate the energy flow of someone else. It would cause a definite and horrible death." Then he reached out with a hand towards the necklace. "Don't touch it!" McGonagall called out, horrified. Professor Marcheshon turned to look at her, his hand still in midair. "Don't worry, Professor. The necklace won't affect me. My inner energy is under my complete control and won't come near the necklace. For me, it's perfectly safe." Then he lifted the necklace. Both McGonagall and Snape tensed, waiting for Professor Marcheshon to meet a horrible fate. Nothing happened. The Egyptian brought the necklace close to his eyes and examined it carefully. This thing was made with its curse. It's a pure weapon designed to kill, not just an object that got cursed. It's a poison in itself. Mahad put it down again. A shame. It's extremely well-made medieval handwork.
How do you know all that? McGonagall asked, baffled.
Snape was not surprised. He knew more about magicians than most wizards did. Their rare knowledge of magic and the ways of the world had always fascinated him and scared him. He knew full well that not a single person in this castle would stand a chance against a full-learned magician. I can see it, he stated. Feel it, even. It's highly active. It cursed someone very recently. My question is, whom? He faced the two teachers. Katie Bell, McGonagall said.
She's in the hospital wing.
Still alive? Professor Marcheshon asked, surprised, although with a hint of relief in his voice. Emotion, Snape noticed. He did feel them.
For the time being,
McGonagall said, her eyes cast to the ground. Take me to see her, the magician said urgently. I might be able to help her, cure her, with a little luck.
What?
McGonagall asked, caught off guard completely.
But Madame Pomfrey
does not have the capability of helping her now, the professor said, trying to convince McGonagall as soon as possible.
Professor McGonagall, it is true that magicians always have had healing skills unmatched by any wizard or witch, due to their supreme understanding of how the world works,
Snape said, not quite believing he was saying such a thing.
McGonagall still couldn't comprehend. No, Yes.
I'll take you, Snape said, losing his patience. With long, hasty strides, he made his way towards the hospital wing. The Egyptian had, however, no trouble keeping up with him. Professor Snape, Madame Pomfrey said as she saw the bat-like man enter. I don't know what's wrong with her. She's dying, and I don't know what to do about it. The rest of what she wanted to say got lost as she saw the magician next to Professor Snape. Many of the staff feared Professor Marcheshon. Snape knew that. It was not something the magician could help. There was something dark over him, something people noticed only on a subconscious level, something which had awakened general distrust, something which made people fall silent when he entered a room. Snape wished he had such an aura around him. I'll take care of this, the Egyptian said, disregarding Madame Pomfrey. Snape recalled hearing Professor Lockhart say the exact same thing once, although he would rather leave an injured student with this foreign magician than with that worthless fake. Madame Pomfrey looked at Snape questioning, but he just nodded as Professor Marcheshon sat down on a chair next to the bed and started staring at the injured Gryffindor. He did just that. Stare. What's he doing? She asked Snape as if the magician was doing something inappropriate. The foreigner just kept disregarding Madame Pomfrey, just like Snape did. Then he suddenly looked up, looking Snape straight in the eyes. I can save her. Then do so, Snape said angrily, tired of the talking. Get out, the magician ordered calmly. No! Madame Pomfrey protested, not quite as calm. Snape just looked taken aback. The history teacher looked up and his cold grey eyes looked straight in those of the nurse. As long as you stand there ogling everything I do, I won't be able to help her any more than you could. Get out! He snarled the last two words, his eyes burning with a cold fire. Snape noted that this was the first time he had seen any real comprehensible emotion come from the seemingly emotionless magician. He turned around briskly and walked out the room, knowing that Madame Pomfrey would follow him. He heard her footsteps behind him and only then remembered that Professor Marcheshon made no sound at all when moving. Snape did not care for what Madame Pomfrey would do. He himself made his way towards his office. There he found McGonagall looking at the necklace with awe. When she heard him come in, she looked at him with a glimmer of hope in her eyes. And? She inquired. He says he can save her, Snape said coldly. He sent me and Madame Pomfrey out of there rather harshly. Thank Merlin for that, McGonagall sighed and put a hand over her heart. Snape disregarded the single tear falling in relief. I don't know what would have become of the school if yet another student would have died. Snape did not answer. Instead, he looked at the necklace. I think it is time to get rid of that thing. He lifted his wand and pointed at the necklace. No, you could make things worse, McGonagall protested, grabbing Snape's arm. She is right, Professor Marcheshon said from the door opening. Snape looked up surprised. He had done his job unexpectedly fast. Snape had to hand it to him. If you destroy it like that, the curse could just as well spread to you. This thing is full of tricks. It will defend itself against destruction. Is Miss Bell okay? McGonagall asked eagerly. Exhausted, but pure. I removed the curse, but it took a lot from both her and my strength. She must be tended to, really carefully. She has not much energy left. Most of it was contaminated and had to be removed. I might have put her in a coma. I could not be as careful as I wanted to be. I should have tended to her earlier. The professor sat down. The exhaustion was barely visible, but it was there. But she'll survive, McGonagall pressed on. Then the magician smiled. It was the first genuine smile either of them had ever seen on the magician's face. Yes. Once her body has regained its natural energy, she'll wake up. Snape turned away briskly, bothered by the foreigner's smile, and walked over to the desk. That's all well, but Katie Bell was not the target of the necklace. She was supposed to deliver it. Can you tell who the target was? The expression on Professor Marchichan's face darkened. Even though I understand what you mean, your statement is incorrect. This necklace does not have a target at all. It was created to kill anyone who comes into contact with it. Had it been made to kill a certain person, I could have told. But this thing just wants to kill, and thus I can't say who it was sent to. Can you destroy it? Snape asked, displeased with the answer he had received. The magician stood up and unceremoniously grabbed the necklace from the desk. Consider it done, he said, and made a fist around it as good as he could. It dissolved in his hand, becoming little less than particles of dust. To Snape, the little particles of dust reminded him of how dangerous a being was sitting in his office. Snape, unlike the other teachers, was highly aware of the darkness surrounding this man. That darkness made him a being far more dangerous than any magician ever should have been.